Why do we talk out loud when we know we're alone?
Scanning for audio.
Welcome once again to another Tin Dog podcast. Before I start on my review of Ankle Grabbers of Doom, please let me chat for a moment. I just need to talk about a couple of things that have come up about episodes that have been on. First off, just a thought. Do you think that the rescue of the pilot aces into the Dalek was the Doctor's trying on some level to see if he could have done the events in Night of the Doctor slightly differently? Basically, without him resulting in having to regenerate into John Hurt and messing with everybody's counting. Because remember, when counting along with children these days, numbers now go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, war, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The number war, or other, doesn't really work. So we need another name like hexadecimal. Should I let this go? I can't, can I? Right, so that was one thought that I just wanted to put out there. Thought it was nice. Secondly, I've been emailed about this deleted scene. Now, I get my review copies before they've been on TV, so I get to talk about the show beforehand. Now, I didn't realise there was even going to be a deleted scene in last week's episode. Everyone else has had something to say about it, and you know what? I thought I'd better say something as well. And what I'm going to say is, I just don't know. You see, I've seen the missing scene. I don't feel traumatised, I don't feel upset, I don't feel like it was paying anybody any bad feeling. There have been lots of, well, I can see sense to beheadings not being a major part of modern culture and TV. But how many complaints would there have been? There was only 6 complaints after the very first episode of Doctor Who this season, and that was only about Madame Vastra sharing breath with her wife. 6. How many complaints do you think the BBC would have got if they'd just broadcast it the way it was sent to me? I get an email saying that it's going to be edited because of some beheadings, which is perfectly fine and perfectly understandable. Let's be sensitive. This isn't the 70s. So, I think there wasn't a beheading in the episode. Oh God, have they sent me the edited version already? I couldn't remember. The reason I couldn't remember there being a beheading is because the sheriff puts his head back on, which you can't really do if you've been beheaded and you're a human being. The guy was a machine, well, cyborg, but let's not be racist here. More importantly than that, I thought that the beheading actually took place at the beginning of the story, where the peasant was killed by the sheriff. I had to watch the episode again in order to work out what had happened. So I hadn't really felt that the comedic moment was even remotely upsetting. The stabbing of the peasant was so much worse. Perhaps that's just me. So I can't judge because I have seen it, and I'm sorry. But that's not important. What is important is what we're here to discuss tonight. And tonight, I'm talking about tonight's story, which was Listen. Listen! I'm going to be a single, lonely voice in the dark. I'm going to be the only person, the only Doctor Who fan who doesn't like this. I can feel it in my water. I can feel collectively the millions and millions of Doctor Who fans who all go, this was brilliant, this was fabulous, this was fantastic, this just isn't for me. As one of the presenters on the Verity podcast has said, all Doctor Who is not made for me, and that's the way it needs to be. And she is right. She is right beyond belief. And this is one of the ones that wasn't made for me. I'll be nipping back to watch Robot of Sherwood again, because this just isn't my kind of Doctor Who. That's not to say that I don't enjoy Doctor Who when it's scary. No. This is going to need a lot more explaining. You see, on paper, it is a perfect Doctor Who story. It genuinely is. Is it dark? Check. Is it complex? Yep, check. Is it character-driven? Yep. Does it have a narrative? We'll get back to you, but yes. Does it have massive amounts of TARDIS interior? Again, check. More than have been around for a while. We're getting to see a lot more of the nice library. Yes, the world-famous librarian agenda. It's well worth going for. What I'm enjoying particularly is the fact that the Doctor's leaving books on stairs. His shelves are already bulging. Too much so that he has to stock his stock on the stairs. That chair's fabulous. There needs to be some sort of leather upholstery agenda going on as well. So yes, it had many, many of the things that I adore. Just a few things that I don't like. And that's probably where it comes for me. Now, I'm a 42-year-old man. I should be able to understand Doctor Who. When it finished, I turned to my wife and I was confused. And she turned to me and said she was confused. And I thought, fair enough, this is great. We can both discuss why we're confused and come to some sort of solution. I asked her what she's confused about. She was confused about the barn and why it was significant. Again, we'll probably have to come back to that later because I had to explain to her about the barn and she was going, what? John Hurt was in a barn? I didn't see that at all, and I had to remind her, and she kind of twigged eventually, and I was going to show the episode and she said there was no need, and personally I believe her. Mainly because the sets didn't look exactly the same, but of course they definitely were. Is this because you wanted some remarkable full circle thing where you wanted Clara to have a part of the new Doctor and the original Doctor before he left Gallifrey in the part of the time stream and messing about and an extension of the narrative, or did you just have a set left over that you wanted to use? Discuss at your own leisure. I personally think it was mainly use an old set and a bit of a clip so you can rub John Hurt's the number war in our face again. The Doctor asks himself a question at the beginning. Why talk to yourself? Well, the answer is plain and simple for everyone who's ever listened to a Big Finish. The answer is so that the Doctor can talk to himself and we'll know what's going on audio. That is why the Doctor talks to himself. Question asked, question answered, move along. Now, people like us, fans, reviewers, punters, we've all got this sense of entitlement, something that I've been trying to lose for years. But I just can't be just simply grateful for new content. I feel opinions bubbling inside, points of view. I'm invested in the programme, and perhaps that's where it comes from. So I'm sorry that I'm not just somebody who'll sit there and take it, but I guess I am, because I'm hardly going to, have a podcast and complain about it. Again, we'll have to talk about Mr. Pink in a minute. I'm looking at my notes and I'm all over the place because there's just so much to say. And every time I'm looking at something in my notes, I'm going, but that was a positive, but that was a positive, but that was also a positive. Let's look at the basic storyline. Let's call it the A-plot. The A-plot is the Doctor wants to investigate this creature that he's clearly invented using the power of conjecture that exists somewhere. Something silent, something that could, write on blackboards when he's not looking, despite the fact that it looked like it was in his own handwriting. But the words appear by themselves. He puts the chalk down, he monologues, he looks down, the chalk's on the ground, the words has appeared on the board. We never see him write it down. These words appear at the behest of the creature, and I'll use the rabbit ears for that. So we're already onto something. The Doctor is A, suffering from mental issues, or B, there is a creature. As we've seen the show for the last 50 years, we're going to go for B, there is a creature out there. Something that is very, very good at hiding. Now, I'm not a big fan of the historical Doctor Who story. Please bear with me. In the historical Doctor Who story, there are no monsters. I'm of the generation that JNT was thinking of when he went, we've got to have monsters in this. And I don't know, perhaps I've just been fed these for too long, because I like the monsters, because I like finding out about them so I can find out how to defeat them, because that's how my psyche works. I like knowing the Achilles heel of monsters. That's probably why I don't like zombies, because they don't have one. They just keep coming, and there's millions of them. The only way you can survive a zombie holocaust is by outliving them until they run out of food. That's not important. The important thing is that with the Daleks, you don't run upstairs, but you know to aim for the eye stalk. You know that you just have to outwit them. Gold, nail varnish cleaner, radiation. These are the things that take out Cybermen. Pteroleptils wheeze a lot. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, I like knowing what the monsters are, I like knowing their motivations, and I like knowing how to stop them. Now, Moffat has already created a silent, invisible killer of a monster. These are what sprang to mind, the Vashta Narada. But that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with something else. The Doctor is dealing with dreams. These two things, he's put them together. They don't necessarily have to go together, but he's done it in his head using the power of conjecture. That everyone at some point in their life has a dream that something grabs from underneath their bed. I can categorically say I have never had that dream. The Doctor, however, has had that dream. Clara asks him, and he doesn't answer. Now, the existence of the hiding creatures is fair enough, but unfortunately they don't eat. If you saw them eat, then that's an issue. The business with the moving coffee cup later on is a brilliant example of that. You see, as an audience, we're buying into this, but we're buying into it, and every time we buy into a part of this narrative, part of the story, part of the A-plot, we're giving a little part of ourselves, and this is building tension, the tension that can only be revealed by the revealing of a monster. God Complex is a perfect example of this. You build, you invest, you build, you invest, you've got tension, and then there's a payoff because the monster actually looks good. Or sometimes the monster looks terrible, but you still get the payoff because you know what's going on. This is the A-plot. The A-plot is there in order to distract us while the B-plot happens. The B-plot is the Pink storyline. You see, we've had our introductions, and that's absolutely fine, but Rupert Pink becoming Danny Pink, the story of the soldier without a gun, he's not broken, he's just a toy, but he becomes Soldier Dan, who is there to protect everyone. Clara is part of her own timeline, she's messing about with it more and more. The psychic circuits of the TARDIS being a bit organic, very nice touch, kinda pointless, but still a nice touch. She is thinking about Danny Pink. She is engineering her own destiny. She is creating her own grandson. It's a grandson paradox. But this way she's engineered her own birth rather than the other way round. Her own grandson's birth, if that makes sense. Yes, it made us jump because it's quite clearly the same actor. And in 100 years' time we'll be having time travel experiments. Why we'd invite people to travel through time is beyond me, and it wouldn't be some sort of secret thing. But that's just me. In 100 years' time, who knows what will happen. But I'm sure the backward steps in time travel are what results in the storyline of Towns Wen Chiang. So this whole relationship, this whole messing with somebody's timeline, and of course, very, very important, the trip to the end of the universe, where all the safeties are switched off and the Doctor manages to finally make it to the end of time, where he's not the last man standing, and it's not a competition, except of course we know that it so is. How many times in Dark Eyes has Paul McGann's Doctor, still number 8, managed to almost nudge to the end of the universe and see what exactly is going on? But the Doctor did make it, and that's nice. And I'm sure on the other side of that planet he is there, possibly being the one banging on the outside of the door. You see, at every stage they give you what the alternative reasoning could be for the storyline and the A-plot existing. But as an audience member, you're constantly going, no, it's definitely a monster, it's definitely a monster. And then you discover at the end, it just isn't. Fear itself is the creature. That is the monster in season 6 of Buffy. Well, also growing up. When there isn't a big bad, the big bad is fear itself. The act of being frightened allows you to have an edge, and that's what makes you a better person. Perhaps that's what Moffat was going for. So the soldier with no gun, it's Moffat and his warrior doctor motif. Well, he won't be going to the academy, and we know he does, and we know he gets 51% on his second attempt. Soldier, Chancellery Guard, still born to the House of Longbarrow in my own personal head canon. So, I just don't know what to say. Because there was no creature to defeat, because there was no monster, because it just didn't emotionally pay me off, and then I realised I'd been tricked into paying attention into the B-plot, which I didn't genuinely care about. Despite the stunning acting, I was so desperate to enjoy this, but I just couldn't. Perhaps I would have been better off just not knowing what the significance of the barn was. And yes, tonight we have yet another actor's name to remember on the big list of people who've played the Doctor. Admittedly, in silhouette. So yes, it's not Hyde. It's not the childhood scares of my youth. And it had things to say, just like last week's Robin Hood. But I, for one, will be listening to the Robin Hood much more. Capaldi is so good as the Doctor, I didn't even notice the performance. He just is the best Doctor. And that's something, after 4 stories, he can be terribly proud of. One thing that was good about this story is that there was no mention whatsoever of the Promised Land. Well, that's good as far as I'm concerned. Unless, of course, as people tend to be going on about, it really is Gallifrey. I definitely don't think it is. That would be ridiculous. One thing that I think should never, ever, ever be done is the Young Doctor. The Gallifreyan Academy, like Starfleet Academy, is a show that should never happen. It was banded around in the 90s and should stay there. But Gary Russell once said exactly the same about Gallifrey, and that was remarkably good. So what do I know? And with that, I'll fade away and come back next time talking about Doctor Who. Perhaps this week I might even review The Engines of War, George Mann's marvellous War Doctor novel. So until next time, where I'm sure I'll be in a better mood after seeing something else, be seeing you.
Fear makes companions of us all.
You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.